All right, happy Thanksgiving week. This is your short little note session for the turkey coloring. So we are going to be working on naming covalent compounds today. And naming covalent compounds is different than naming ionic compounds because with covalent compounds, they don't really have a set ratio based on ions. Remember, with ionic compounds, we would do kind of the crisscross method. So the numbers were not part of our naming at all. So you kind of have to keep these two different systems straight because they're not the same. With covalent naming, we use prefixes, and prefixes tell us the quantity of each atom in the compound. Okay. So we have different prefixes that we'll use in the name to represent each number, and you're probably kind of familiar with these from math or like different geometric shapes. So one prefix that you will put on to describe one is mono, 2 is di, 3 is tri, 4 is tetra, kind of like what we've used in our molecular shapes. Tetrahedral. Tetra means 4. And then after this, they're going to be really, really familiar, I think. 5, penta, like a pentagon. Hexa. Hepta. 8 is octa, like an octagon. Nona. And deca. So do memorize these. Most of them you probably already know. I'm guessing the ones you don't know are, or are maybe less familiar, 4 for tetra, and maybe, I don't know, there might be one or two more that you aren't super familiar with, so just memorize those so that it will make the naming process easier for you. These will not be given in a reference, so you will need to know the prefixes. Whenever we are naming covalent compounds, we're going to use what we call binary compounds. That means they just have 2 elements. There are other covalent compounds that have 3, 4, 5 different elements in them, and they're named a little bit differently. But this process is for 2-element compounds. So for the first element in the compound, you're going to write the prefix followed by the element name. And remember, all of these are nonmetals, so you'll just find the element name on the periodic table and put that prefix on the front of it. Okay. One little note about the first element, we do not use a prefix if it is 1. Okay, so for this prefix 1, do not use on first element. If it's 1, it's just implied. So if I had, CH4, I wouldn't say monocarbon, I would say carbon. Okay, so do not use a prefix on the first element if it's 1. That's important, the first element. The second one, you use mono to your heart's desire. Then the second element, or ending element, again, you will write the prefix to tell the quantity, followed by the modified element name. And it's modified the same way we did in the past with the IDE ending. Okay. If there is only one element, so it's not 2 different elements, then you will just name that element with its element name. That is a diatomic element. So you wouldn't write dihydrogen if it's H2. You would just write hydrogen. I'm going to make a note down here. If there is only one element, So that means there's no prefix and no ending change for a diatomic element. You'll just use its regular element name. So let's look at some examples. I personally think this naming system is easier than ionic because you just look at how many. You don't have to think about charge or Roman numerals or math or patterns or crisscross method. None of that applies for covalent because it's a whole different type of bonding. This one you're just going to find quantity, prefix, element name. For each covalent compound, match the prefix to the quantity it represents and identify the elements using the periodic table. If the name is given, write the chemical formula. If the chemical formula is given, write the name. One way that I sort of like to go through this process is if I have the name given, I'll just kind of underline the prefixes first. So I see tri, and then there's nothing. So that tells me this is a 1, and tri is 3. So that just kind of tells me the numbers. Then I use my periodic table, and I find my element symbols. Antimony is Sb, and bromide would be bromine. So I know those are my elements. Now I need to put in how many, because in a chemical formula, our quantity is written as a subscript. That is still true. So it would be Sb1, Br3. Same thing applies as before. A 1 is implied within a chemical formula. So it would just be Sb, Br3. That is antimony tribromide. You can do that for all of these. Kind of underline the prefix. Hexa is 6 and mono is 1. You can probably see already how it will help you to have these memorized. And then the element names, boron is B. So we know boron needs to have 6. And silicide, silicone, and 1. I don't need to write the 1. That is going from name to formula. And then going the other way, let's do a couple of these as well. 4 is tetra. P is phosphorus. Just write it all as kind of one word. Tetraphosphorus. And the second part is penta because of the 5. Sulfide. Tetraphosphorus, pentasulfide. This next one, you might be tempted to say dioxygen or dioxide. However, this is that third scenario where it's only one element. So this is just the element name, no prefix, no ending, oxygen. And we'll do one more. Se with no prefix, that means there's just, well, it doesn't have a subscript, so that means it's just 1, and we don't include a prefix because it's our first element. So this is selenium, not monoselenium, and then our second element has 6, that's hexa, and then fluorine, you change the ending to IDE, it'll be hexafluoride. Beautiful. So you finish these. And then you will do your turkey coloring. So you have a color code. The way this works is you'll look at the first one. This is CLF3. So you'll name this appropriately. It has some examples in here that are trying to confuse you. They're going to be all really, really close. So make sure you did it correctly before you start coloring. And then you can have at it, okay? So CL, there's only one of them, but we don't use mono on the first element, so that's just chlorine. So that takes this one out of the play. And then we have 3, that's tri, so I don't see that there, that one's out. And then we have trifluorine and trifluoride. The ending of the second one needs to be changed to IDE, so that would be chlorine trifluoride. So I know that I'm going to color all of my number 1s red. So in your turkey, you'll go over here, and anywhere that's a 1, you will color that red. Okay. That is your turkey coloring. Hope you have a great week and a relaxing and delicious Thanksgiving and time with family.